What's going on, folks? This lighting is totally blown out. I'm going to try to turn this one off. All right, let's try that. Is that better? Hopefully. All right. Well, hey, it's Friday night. I thought I would do a stream. I don't know if it's too late. Kind of was just hanging out and not really doing a whole lot of anything tonight, so I figured I would hop on. I haven't done one of these in, I don't know, 4 or 5 months. It's been a minute, but sometimes I get some pretty good participation. A lot of people want to jump in and talk on a Friday night. They got nothing better to do. So now that things are opening up, everyone might be out partying and gathering and hanging out and doing big club things. So we'll see how it goes tonight. Maybe we'll get some participation. But what I was thinking overall is that I was going to do a stream on a system that I haven't ever really done a full console collection series video on, because I just don't have a whole lot of love for it. And I've probably tried to do a video on it multiple times, but have never really found the passion to go ahead and do a full console collection series. So figured I would do a stream, talk a little bit about that system, what it means and doesn't mean to me, cover some of the games in the library. Most of them I'm just not really that passionate about. I've tried, trust me. But the other flavor of the stream is I thought I would do some vintage roasting of the system from a 90s perspective, when the console wars were definitely a big thing. So we'll see if get some more activity here, and I'll start going through my games that I pulled out for the system. Just see if anybody's interested in talking about the console that is famously known as the Nintendo 64. 64 bits of bland power and foggy graphics. If you haven't already figured out, I was definitely a PS1 kid from my videos. Not even really kid. It was more of a PS1 teenager, I guess I should say. And loved the Sega Saturn also during that period. So the N64 was always like by far the third fiddle. But I know a lot of people absolutely love this system. So I just don't get it. I didn't get it back then. I don't get it today. There's a few games in this pile that I definitely do like. So it's not like I hate everything on the system, but it's definitely not one of my favorites. So thought we would talk about some N64 games. Maybe I'll get some hate from some people that absolutely love the system. Maybe we'll get some people that want to share in the N64 bashing. If you were kind of similar to my generation and you just didn't understand why the system was relatively popular. I won't say super popular, because it really wasn't as popular as the systems that came before it. But I don't know. I guess we'll talk about some cartridges and what all came out on this system, whether it's good, bad, or ugly. If you guys are on the chat, feel free to chat in some questions. If you don't want to talk about the N64, I'm open to that as well. Like I said, I can meander very easily in this stream. That's the beauty of this video tonight, is that I don't have to focus and have a concrete narrative of what I want to discuss. So let's talk some N64 titles, I guess. So first up, we have, geez, lighting in this basement is terrible. I apologize. I guess that'll work. Aero Fighters Assault. I bought this really cheap. Why did I buy this game? Because of the Aero Fighters series of shooters that we did get. The original Aero Fighters on the Super Nintendo. It's considered one of the hardest to find games for the Super Nintendo. But honestly, it's not as good as Aero Fighters 2 or 3. And ultimately, those games really begat the Strikers series, because they were generally the people that made up the shooter team of Psycho, that made the whole Aero Fighters games early, and then moved on to Gunbird and Strikers and all that good stuff. But this game is really weird, because it is technically Video System. It even has their branding here on the cover. That is the company that made all the old Aero Fighters games. But Aero Fighters Assault is not a 2D shoot 'em up, which it should be. It is a really clunky flight sim. And I'm not a big flight sim guy whatsoever. So the other weird thing I was looking at right when I was pulling this game off the shelf, I never noticed this before. I don't think this game was Japanese developed because it's credited on the back to a company I'd never heard of called Paradigm Entertainment, which doesn't sound too promising. It does have the video system logo, and then right below that, you have another brand logo on the back of the box. Probably not going to see these, but kind of like right in here area. This game was distributed by Vic Tokai, which was kind of a hit or miss sign of quality. Sometimes their games were really good. Sometimes Vic Tokai just published some junk that they were able to license easily. For a few minutes, I was immediately disappointed that it was not a shooter, like space shooter. It was a flight sim style game, and I guess I'm just hanging on to it because I'm like, oh, well, if it says Aero Fighters on it, someday this will be a $1,000 game like the Super Nintendo game. But I don't think that's ever going to happen because they made a whole lot more of these. It's not good, and I don't think even people that were into the N64 back then think of this game very fondly. But regardless, I have a nice, complete copy of this in my collection. So that is the first one of my N64 pile of shame. I don't know where I'm going to stack these. I don't want to put them on the floor because there are these cardboard boxes, and I'll probably step on them in about 20 minutes. So I guess let's put it back here. This will be like the discard pile. I don't know. But yeah, if you've joined in, feel free to chat in. Let me know you're out there. If it's any of my regulars, I can see where I go with the stream. If not, I'll just continue on going, and you guys can watch this whenever it's convenient for you. I'll leave the stream up, and I'll probably get tons of hate in the comments from all the N64 lovers, or considering most of my fans, they're probably going to agree with me and say that the system was not all that and a bag of chips. But regardless, it has some games that I have. So next one I'm going to show, if you saw my last pickups video, you've already seen this game. I just recently got this. This is Castlevania Legacy of Darkness. I get this confused with the other Legacy of Innocence or whatever it is. But this Legacy of Darkness, which was the second Castlevania for the N64. I don't have the first one. I never picked it up. Kind of would like to get it now, even though I know it's not good. I've played it before. Actually, I played that one more than I played this one, but I've heard this one's quite a bit better. So Castlevania going 3D was not a easy gestation period. It was a lot of backlash, especially around that first one. This one I don't think sold well enough for people really to dig into it, but I know this one had a little bit better reputation. Basically, they fixed a lot of the issues with the one that was kind of rushed to market. I do need to play this more extensively. I popped it in just to make sure it worked and everything, but I have this nice complete copy now, and I've been looking forward to playing this one. So maybe this game will change my opinion on the N64. I highly doubt it, but we can find out what happens with that. So if you play this game, feel free to hop on in and let me know what you think of it. I'm hoping it'll surprise me. Maybe it'll actually be something I'll want to latch on to for a little bit. I obviously love all the old original Castlevania games, but this one's one that I just never had back in the day, so I just don't have any kind of attachment to it. And I didn't even know anybody that had this when the N64 was hot, because I think this one just kind of flew under the radar, and so many people got burned on that first Castlevania that they didn't even give this one a chance. So, but yeah, this is one that I am actually excited to dig into for my N64 collection, because I'm kind of playing it with fresh eyes. I don't have any like tainted history with this one like I do with some of the other games we're going to look at in the pile. So, but yeah, if you play this one, feel free to chat in. Let me know what you think of it. I'm kind of curious if there's any other opinions out there. I kind of wonder if this game would even get noticed at all if it didn't have the Castlevania branding. Maybe it would just be seen as kind of a generic 3D game, but obviously it helps a little bit. So we'll see how that one goes. So yeah, that's another of my N64 games that I don't really talk about much. Give me a second here to get refreshed. So next we'll move on to a series I really like, but this is a game that I barely have played. I mean, I played it when I got it, but I don't really have a whole lot of history with this one either. And that is FZero X. I think this one's actually decent for an N64 game. I'm not going to hate on this one too much. Obviously, it's pretty foggy. I do remember that, but I think the sense of speed in this one was okay, which was kind of the forte of the FZero games. If they screwed that up, what else would you have? But Why I don't think anyone really gravitates this one now is because the FZero GX on the GameCube was incredible, and that's because Sega developed it and really put a lot of their attention in it to make it extremely fast. So this one does support the 4-player, so I will say that with N64 being a kind of a trailblazer with having 4-player games, that was pretty cool. You didn't have any other consoles really doing that at the time, so I will give them a little credit that it also enabled, since you didn't have to buy a separate add-on to do 4-player, more developers felt the need to put 4-player functionality in the game. So definitely a nice perk. But don't get too excited that I have this, beautiful complete in the box copy, because it is not a beautiful complete in the box copy. This one I bought from probably a Blockbuster, maybe one of my local rental stores when they're blowing it out. And guess what? It doesn't even have the side flap. They were one of the companies that sliced the side of the box to make their rental store cases or whatever. So kind of looks nice on the surface because this one was just put in a plastic rental case, and then nobody actually touched the box or took it home or anything like that. But the stupid rental company cut the edge off it. So also, I don't even think I have a manual for it. So I just have a cart flopping around in this box. But oh, look at that! I never even cleaned the void stickers off it. Might leave that out. That might give me something to do. Anyways, of all the N64 games, this one's okay, I guess. I won't hate on it too much. It didn't tarnish the series legacy or anything like that. So, if you like F-Zero games, that's fine. I think that, some of the other F-Zero games that came after it were more like portable type stuff. There's two GBA games in the US, and then one more that Japan got that we didn't get because the series kind of lost its luster. So maybe Nintendo will bring this series back at some point. We'll see it on Switch or some other system. But overall, this is not Nintendo's proudest series, I guess, anymore. They don't really do much with it other than put Captain Falcon in Smash games. So yeah, those are a few games. Checking the message I just got. It's out there. Okay, nothing critical. All right, we're N64 games. This is what I really like. Actually, I'm not gonna say bad things about this one at all. This is one of my favorites on the system. This is Goemon's Great Adventure. Very interesting that we got this game in the US, I guess. First of all, because we only got maybe a total of 4 Goemon games in the US compared to 30 that exist in Japan. So it was kind of unique that they brought this game here, and it was the second Goemon game for the N64. And what else I think is interesting, we're going to talk about the first one here in a moment, but I think it's interesting that they kind of took a step back in this one in a good way. The first one was full 3D. This one was 2.5D, and honestly, it plays way better than the first one. I think this one's great. I do have this one in the box. My box is a little bit smushed, unfortunately, but this is a really hard one to find complete. I do need a manual. There is a video game retailer online that has a manual for sale right now. I've kind of been eyeing. It's one of it's a physical store in a state, but they do mail order, and I saw it in their website, and I'm like, I should probably order that, but it's expensive, and they want sales tax, and they want shipping, and the shipping is like a bulk rate when it's just a manual, and so it's kind of expensive. So I've held off on buying it so far. But that's definitely one of my favorites on the system. There's no hate for Goemon's Great Adventure. It's a lot of fun. It's an action RPG if you're not familiar with it. Konami's humor was definitely on point with this. There's references to other Konami games, so if you like Konami stuff, it's definitely good. And I just think if you're a longtime Goemon fan or you're an introductory to the series, this is a good one to start. They are heavily Japanese-themed games for sure. And that's why it was kind of a treat when Konami decided to finally bring some of these here. You can get this probably dirt cheap in Japan because I'm sure it sold much better there, but US market obviously was not a very big hit. So, yeah, Goemon's Great Adventure is actually a pretty cool game for the system. But I'm telling you, my praise for the system is going to dip here pretty soon. It's not all roses, but this one I do like. So hopefully I'll get a chance to complete this one soon. and see, if I can have a nicer box, maybe at some point. I would like that, just because you can't really see. Yeah, you can see it. It's pretty smooth on the front. The rest of the box is actually pretty good. The front of the box is smushed. I could probably try to pop that back out. I don't know. Get a tool on that and see what happens to it. So anyway, that one's pretty cool. Not gonna hate on that one. Let's talk about a fan favorite for a lot of people that I don't get. Um, this is, of course, Goldeneye for the N64, which was like the Halo of its day, or the Call of Duty of its day, or whatever you want to say. Everyone wanted this game back then. It was so popular. Hey, I see I've got Guns joining my chats. How are you doing? Join the N64 hate parade if you like, or you can tell me I'm crazy, because I just don't really get this system. But anyways, back to Goldeneye. This was a first-person shooter, obviously based on the James Bond movie. No surprise there. Developed by Rare, which gave it all kinds of nerd points for the N64, because everyone saw them as the second coming behind Nintendo, even when they delayed their games for sometimes 2 to 3 years at a time, and frustrated fans with sometimes the games being buggy even after a long delay. My history of this is actually my original copy. I bought this one new, and the reason I bought this game, I really wasn't even a big fan of this game when it came out, but when I was going away to college, one of my good friends was my roommate for a quarter or semester or whatever, and he really egged me on to get this, because he's like, "Oh, this is why you want an N64. This is the coolest." But he didn't have an N64, and I did, just because I got one cheap back then. And so he talked me into it. He's like, "You gotta get this game. We gotta play this. This is gonna be the talk of the dorm. Everyone's gonna want to play Goldeneye." I'm like, "Okay, whatever. I'm just gonna probably stick to some of the other stuff I'm gonna show in this video." So we bought it, and it actually turned out that almost everybody on my dorm floor had an N64 and had this game. So like, nobody wanted to play it with us, because they were all playing their own copy, and I think they had their own save files and whatnot, so they didn't want to play multiplayer. But we would play multiplayer in this a little bit. I don't know. I just don't get into first person shooters. I don't get it. Like, I guess this one's a little bit more approachable, because it's not just your standard, alien shooting or space marine type game. It actually had like a known property and a movie license, so it was kind of human and more relatable. But I mean, I guess this game just was approachable for a lot of people, so maybe that's why it gained such a big audience. But I never really got the love. I do kind of like this early packaging with the giant Rumble Pack icon on there. Later on, they just kind of gave you a little logo that said like it supports the Rumble Pack, but this one was like a big deal that it supported the Rumble Pack, because the Rumble Pack was new and exciting. And it was also another expensive accessory that you had to buy for the system, and you had to put batteries in it, which when Sony came out with the DualShock, they built all that into the controller. So again, N64 just, milking the fans with extra costs and stuff like that. Kind of like what they do today with all the Switch stuff. That seems like anytime you buy a Switch, you got to spend another $500 in accessories to get up and running with it. But yeah, I'm sure this game's got its fans out there. I'm just pretty neutral to it, or actually, I just don't really care. But I would feel bad if I sold this copy, because again, this was kind of, it's kind of a point in time game I remember playing, and my friend was really passionate about it. We still talk today; like, I'm still friends with him, even though we didn't graduate together or anything. But I can't see us ever pulling that out and playing it again, so it just kind of sits around. What else about N64? So let's talk about some other games that I bought cheap, and I don't really know why, and I just sat on them. So this is another rental store closeout pickup from a long time ago, like probably the early 2000s, I would say I got this. It's Mario Golf. I think this was developed by the Hot Shots Golf team. Am I crazy about that? I think it was the same people who made the Hot Shots Golf games on the PS1. So I think it was Camelot was the company. But it's golf with Mario characters. I mean, it's nothing earth shattering. So it plays okay, obviously, but it's just, whatever. If I was going to play a golf game, I would play Turf Masters because that's the best. So, anyways, N64 just really rode on Mario's laurels, just like they do with that kind of thing today, with tons and tons of Nintendo games with Mario in it. And I kind of think this was the start of it. I mean, you had a little bit of that on Super Nintendo where they were starting to branch Mario out into other themes, but it really took hold on the N64 and then never stopped from there. You had Mario in like all these little segmented sports games and side stories and all this stuff when we really just wanted a real Mario game. We didn't want all this crap. And I think it was just a distraction to keep people, keep buying the franchise regardless of whether you liked it or not. So, yeah, like I said, this one was an X rental copy. It is complete, unlike the other one, but the corner of it's kind of manged up. I don't know what happened to it there. I guess this was one that they actually let customers touch or something like that. But, yeah, it's got the manual and everything in it. It's well used. But, yeah, I mean, I guess if this is your thing and you just really love Mario and that's all you really want to play, the N64 has plenty of that for the fans. I don't know. What else? Is this chat even interesting? I'm just so neutral to these games. That's why I never made a full video on them. So I don't really know what else I want to talk about tonight. But I guess I'll just keep rambling on. And if anyone else wants to change the topic, we certainly can. Because I got more games and I can pause and talk about whatever. So next up is one that most people would be like, why do you own this? This is Mike Piazza's Strike Zone, and it is not a good console baseball game. I like console baseball games, but this is not a good one. Why did I thought Mike Piazza was really cool in the 90s. I didn't even buy this back then. I bought this more recently, but I got it cheap and it was complete. But I wasn't really a big LA Dodgers fan. I mean, I'm a diehard Cardinals fan. You can tell. But for some reason, we just didn't really have a star catcher back in the 90s, and I thought Mike Piazza was really cool. He was, had that whole Tommy Lasorda family thing that was a little weird, that he got drafted on a favor to his manager, basically, and then turned out to be a really good player that got drafted really low and made it to the big leagues and played for quite a long time with the Dodgers, and then he moved on to the Mets. And then I remember the other thing about him was, he had tude because he was into metal and he liked to drum and stuff like that. So it was kind of funny that, and he had like a mullet, basically. So for 90s baseball players, he had a little bit of character, and I guess I liked it compared to some of the more boring players that were playing at the time. I also think, he was a good hitter, and I don't think he ever really got tied up into the whole steroids thing that, I'm aware of. Maybe he did them, but he never got really incriminated for it. So I think if anything, it's cool that his numbers will stand, undisturbed and all that. But as far as this game, even for baseball games on the N64, it's very low tier. It's not one of the better ones. So it was kind of interesting that they put this out there, but it's not very good. Just reading the chat. So Gunn says he didn't get an N64 until 2000. Gauntlet Legends sold me. I was such a fan of the arcade game. Yeah, I like Gauntlet Legends, but I can get it on other systems. I think that was the one that I got on Dreamcast about that time, and so honestly, I would rather play that game on the Dreamcast. But it's cool that it was multi-platform. I'm sure it's fine on the N64. I was NES and Super Nintendo, and then N64 came out, and I was kind of just like, bleh, like that's it. That's what we waited so long for. But I'm thinking I bought mine used in 98, maybe late 98. And then, I even worked in a video game store, and then games would come out for the N64. And, some of these games had a retail of like $74.99. Like even in 2021, that's an absurd amount to charge for a new release game. So that was hugely off-putting when I was on a college budget, and I'm like, oh, I'll get a new game for the N64, but it's $80. Like, I don't have that kind of money to spend on a new release game. So I waited on stuff to get, traded in and used, and some of it dropped in price, and some of it never dropped in price. And that's why I never really expanded the library on the system, because I just don't feel like paying top dollar for games on the system that I just don't have a whole lot of nostalgia for. So But anyways, yeah, that's just a little more about that system and some of the pricing on it. Oh, my stack is falling over. What happens when you have a rental store case? I don't know. We can talk about this one a little bit. Gun says Rogue Squadron was pretty good. Nothing like the GameCube, obviously. Yeah, I'm not a Star Wars fan either, so that didn't help. I think they had. I guess if you are a Star Wars fan, I think the N64 had some Star Wars exclusive games. Some of them obviously got put on multiple systems, so some were like on PS1, some were on Dreamcast, stuff like that. But yeah, I guess if you were a Star Wars fan and then you had those exclusives on the system, I could see that being a source of nostalgia for people for sure. This one I'm really excited about, honestly, just having it complete. It was kind of a long journey to get this game complete. For some reason, every time I would find it, it would always be loose and it would always be kind of roached out. This one's actually in really nice shape. This was a early N64 game. I want to say this came out in 96 or maybe 97. Maybe it'll tell me. And it says 97, so we'll go with that. This one was developed by Treasure. It's Mischief Makers. It's a really weird 2D action platformer. All Treasure games are generally pretty weird. This one was a collaboration between Treasure and Enix, and so they were trying to branch out at Enix and make some games with other genres. They were kind of known for RPGs and stuff like that. And this one came out, and it was kind of weird. I don't really think this game sold all that well, so that's probably one of the reasons that it's getting pretty expensive now, is that there's just not a whole lot of these out there, and then all the Treasure fans now want it for completing sets of Treasure games and stuff like that, which is kind of a cool subset to go for. I have a lot of Treasure games in my collection, but I wouldn't say I'm ready to go for like a full subset. There's some of the games are Japanese exclusives, and they're kind of difficult to find or expensive or whatever. But yeah, Treasure did give the N64 some love. This game was a console exclusive, so that's kind of cool. I'll give it some credit for that. Surprisingly, I don't think they've ever brought this game to. Maybe it's on streaming services. I don't know. I don't download games very much, but I don't think you can really get this game anywhere else. They never put it on a compilation or anything like that, so not a real easy one to get. Another game that Treasure put out on the N64 first that I don't have in my collection, but I have it on other systems, is Bangai, and I really like that game. It's a very figured 360-degree shooter. Very, very like teeny tiny graphics on it, but it's all for the sake of just having thousands and thousands of bullets on the screen all at the same time, which was pretty unique during the time of the N64. So I will say that game brought something new, but it only came out in Japan. And, I was actually going to import a copy because the N64 is relatively easy to play import games on. You just got to break a couple tabs out of the system or get a converter pass-through. I did mod mine back in the day. I remember that was a big deal. I went in with like some snippers, and it's probably still tore up now. But anyway, I just like went in the cartridge slot and then snipped out those two things, and suddenly you could play imports in the N64. So, but I found the reason I did not get Bangai is that soon after it came out on N64, the Dreamcast version got announced. I'm like, obviously I'm going to have a Dreamcast, so I got it for that, and I really like that game. But it did start on the N64, so I'll give it some credit there. Oh my God, Matt! What is Zelda? Can you tell me all about it? Is that a neat game that is like? Did Limited Run make that or something? I've never heard of that game before. I'll have to check that out. Is that on the N64? Well, we'll see if maybe I learn about that game by the end of this video. So yeah. A little rambling on this one. I do like this game. I'm not going to hate on this one too much. Obviously don't expect too much because it was an early N64 game. I wouldn't say it really pushes the hardware or anything like that. It's just a 2D game. And it's weird, just like most Treasure stuff. So next we have, some of these games are not complete. I don't have everything complete for the system. I try not to buy games unless I can get them complete or at least boxed, because I just don't really like how the carts look loose. Well, let's talk about that. Some other things to hate on the N64 for. So Matt says it's now a top 10 Nintendo 64 countdown. Yeah. Like, comment, subscribe, put it all over the internet. Top 10 N64 hidden gems, mega rare. LOL. So here's obviously a loose N64 cart. We're going to talk about what it is here in a minute. But why does the N64 terrible yet again? Oh, let's look at my huge stack of cartridges that I have filed by the spine. I don't know what game this is. Really, Nintendo? Come on. They could have done that. And then you have, like, you know, a million inconsistent ways. You got the people that took marker to the spines and wrote all over them. You got the aftermarket stickers you can slap on there. You have people that just, like, put a Post-it note on the end and draw a title for it that way. It's annoying. Like, the Sega Master System did the same crap, and I love that system. So you would think that, you know, they would have learned. I mean, they got it right on the Nintendo and the Super Nintendo. So why Nintendo? Why did you do that crap? All right, Matt, we'll talk about that one here shortly. Maybe you can fill me in because I haven't played it much. So anyway, next game I want to talk about here, I've already talked about Goemon's Great Adventure, which I really do like. This is the first Goemon game for the N64, which, again, I am really surprised that of the 4 Goemon games we ever got in the US, 2 of them were on the N64, and there's like 30 in Japan. So very weird that Konami thought that the series was going to break through on the N64. But this is the first Mystical Ninja game on the N64, and it is a full 3D game, and it is a little bit clunky. But I like it anyway. It's still got the charm and the extreme Japaneseness of it. I don't know how they ever thought this game was going to do well in the US, because this one's particularly weird. Storyline as well as gameplay. And then you have these, like, ginormous boss battles in a mech suit and things like that that are really disorienting because they don't really follow along with the rest of the gameplay. But, you know, it follows the Mario 64 general 3D design pretty closely. So if you like that game, it's more like that. I think it came out, you know, pretty soon after, but it clearly was influenced by it. And I really like the series. I just, you know, this one's okay. I would like to have this game complete. It's very expensive now too, even loose. This game's gone up a ton since COVID, and even just in general, this game's been going up for a little while now. But definitely, if you're going to get a Goemon game for the N64, please get Goemon's Great Adventure first. And then if you really like that one, maybe this one's worth playing, but I would not get this as your introductory game, even if it may be a little bit easier to find. I don't know, it's weird. Like, lately, this game's been going for almost as much as the other one. It used to be easier to find. So anyways, and then because I hate, you know, how these things have with the spine and everything like that, I keep most of my loose games in at least a plastic case. Some of them I have labeled, some of them I don't. You know, again, I can't even keep myself consistent for how these games are stored. But at least that way it protects them if I don't have the box and whatnot. So, all right. Well, guess what? We were just talking about this game, sort of. Matt brought it up in the chat, so now we'll talk about it. I have a nice complete copy of Pilot Wing 64. So, Matt, you can fill me in on why this game is so great, because I've barely played it. I think I bought this complete, like, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, and then I played it one night, I remember, and I don't remember much about it at all. I think it was this a launch game? If not, it was very early for the N64. Yeah, this one is really clean. I think I bought this. Where did I find this? I don't know. It doesn't really have any issues, though. It's got all the goodies inside and everything like that. But this game's gone up a lot, too. Like, when I got it, it was not a big deal when I found this game. I think I paid like $10 for it, and it was probably going for like 20 complete. And I noticed this game has shot up a lot in the last year or two. Kind of one that I guess I meant to go back and play a little bit and see what all the fuss is about. And if I don't like it, I probably would sell this one. I'm not super attached to it, but if Matt says it's good, it sounds like it's definitely worth checking out. He said it's a lot of fun. Music's very relaxing and chill. Okay. Maybe I'll pop it in later tonight and see how it is. But this is one of the, you know, first party Nintendo series that I think is dead. Did they ever make another Pilot Wings? Oh yeah, they had what did they have, like a Pilot Wings Resort or something like that. Am I making that up? Wasn't there like a 3DS game? Yeah, I obviously haven't played that one. And then I think the series just died again. Obviously, yeah, it started on the Super Nintendo. And the Super Nintendo game's okay. I've played it a little bit, not much more than this one though. I didn't have. It was weird. Like I think that one was a very early Super Nintendo game, and then this was a very early 64 game. And so you think like maybe they really thought it was going to be a big franchise, and they were setting themselves up for sequels, and then nothing. Like nothing for a long, long time. And then we didn't hear about the series on the GameCube or the Wii. I don't think. And then suddenly a 3DS game came out of nowhere, and nothing again. So, but yeah, that is some Pilot Wings. And Matt says it has blurry graphics, which sounds like most N64 games. I already kind of talked about just in general, this system is so loaded with fogginess and blurriness and bad draw distance, chunky 3D graphics, crude 3D graphics. Just go down the list. I mean, it's weird. This next one I'm going to talk about, though, is a series I've always really liked. Have a lot of history with the N64 version. I was diehard fan of the Ridge Racer series on on PS1, and huge into Rage Racer. Was actually my favorite. A lot of people like Ridge Racer Type 4 the best, but Rage Racer was my jam. And obviously the original Ridge Racer and Ridge Racer Revolution. This one's weird though. It has, I think it was like Nintendo's second or third tier in-house team developed this game. So Namco didn't even really develop it. They just let them use the license to make an N64 game. It's loosely based on some of the other Ridge Racer games, but it's kind of stands alone and is its own thing. It does support 4-player mode, but Ridge Racer really wasn't about being a multiplayer racer in the first place. So, I guess, I guess it kind of was. There was in the arcade, you had multi-cabinets and things like that, but I don't know. I was always big into the more like car customization and earning up points and buying new cars and stuff like that started to generate in Rage Racer, and probably even more so in Ridge Racer Type 4, and then wherever the series went from there, which I kind of started to tune out after Ridge Racer 5. It just kind of got a little generic. But this one's okay. I mean, like, there's nothing inherently wrong with this. It just, did it even need to be a Ridge Racer game? Probably not. Like, I wouldn't say it's necessarily extremely faithful to the franchise, and it didn't move it forward in any way at all, which is weird because, when every time Namco put out a new PS1 Ridge Racer, it was an event. Like, they really pushed the hardware. They tried to do something different with every release. It was a big deal in Japan. Those games were big sellers. They tried to stand out from the licensed racing game pack, which was definitely the big thing during that era, and try to do something different. This one just was like, well, we're Nintendo and we don't have a Ridge Racer, so I guess we should get one of those. Like, there was really nothing special about it. I guess the other thing we should talk about, this is another reason the N64 is whack, is that, good God, the system has a lot of racing and especially kart racing games. And I like racing games, and I think it's just too many. And there's just like, it's really hard to tell the difference between what's good as far as the racing games on the N64 and what is just crap, because there's a lot of junk on that system. The one that I don't get at all, I mean, just from a rarity perspective, I do, but one game you won't see in this video because I sold it last year, and like the peak of COVID price mania, is Stunt Racer N64, which was a Blockbuster exclusive. I had the loose cartridge that I bought on closeout from a Blockbuster back in the day, and then sat on it for like 20 years or whatever, and didn't do anything with it. And I popped it in one day out of COVID boredom last year because I was going through my library and playing some stuff I just really had never dug into, and I was like, wow, this game is absolutely horrid. Like, there is a good reason why Midway chose to pass on a full retail release of Stunt Racer 64. And so Blockbuster, I guess, decided to pull it off the scrap heap, and because they wanted exclusives, and so they put it out. So, and what's funny is that it even supported the expansion pack, and so I just got an expansion pack for the N64 last year because most of the games in this library didn't support it, so I never bothered having one. So I'm like, well, maybe it's better with the expansion pack. Maybe that's going to wake this game up, and it made it look slightly better, but it didn't do anything for the performance of the game. Which some of the games it did help, but this one it didn't. So anyway, I took my Stunt Racer 64 and I put it on eBay, and somebody paid me $340 for a loose cartridge of that piece of crap. And I said, good riddance. I was very happy to get that price. I think it's gone up even more since then, so now maybe I'm stupid for selling it for that, but I don't sell a lot of games out of my personal collection, and I just said, I will never enjoy this game, Stunt Racer 64. So ultimately decided to sell it off, but it just kind of goes back to my point, is there so many disposable racing games on the system. If you're going to have one, at least I guess this is a decent one, but I think the other side of that is there's so many kiddie racing games. I'm sorry, kids kart racing games on the N64. You obviously have your big licensed ones, but there's all kinds of unlicensed or like lesser licenses or generic character ones that are out there that just clutter up the library. So, but yeah, anyway, I'll talk a little bit about Ridge Racer 64 and racing games in general for the system. I don't really like. There's no classic racing games in the system. I mean, I guess you can make a case for Mario Kart 64 if you're really nostalgic for it, but Super Mario Kart is better. I'm sorry, like it always will be. It was more innovative, and Mario Kart 64 was, just kind of okay at its time. And I don't even own it. You won't even see it in this video. So let's move on. So this next one's one I got last year on recommendation from several people. It's not terrible. I mean, it's just a 3D platformer action game, which there's plenty of on the system, with this licensed character, or not licensed, this mascot character that never took off, Rocket. This is Rocket Robot on Wheels. I have the manual, as you can see, and the cartridge. I don't have the box for this one. I will say this is one thing that's kind of neat about N64 is there are some of these cool colored cartridges mixed in the library here and there. This one's red, obviously. There are black cartridges. There's blue cartridges for fishing game, I know. Yellow for Donkey Kong. So, little things like that are kind of neat. Mix up the library. It had all been done before, though. The Super Nintendo had some games with colored cartridges, so wasn't super unique, but I guess it's kind of cool. But this game's okay. I mean, I kind of feel like it was a little overhyped. I guess, if you're going to play a 3D action platformer for the system, this game's all right, but it doesn't really hold up to stuff that was on the PS1 or Saturn or that came after it or things like that. So I don't really think there's a whole lot of nostalgia for this game. It's really just a giant collectathon, which is not my favorite type of platformer. How many times do you really want to play through a level just to collect all the, little random trinkets and stuff like that scattered throughout the level purposefully to add length to the game, not to add value or anything like that. But not really a huge fan of this. The other thing that I guess I would say about this game is it was developed, I think, is the very first game developed by Sucker Punch, which is still actually a very active developer today that has done some big titles. So I'm pretty sure they were responsible for the Sly Cooper series, and then they also put out that Ghost of Tsushima game on the PS4 that I have not played yet. So maybe that's another reason why this game's kind of more popular now than it was even back then, because Sucker Punch has kind of built its legacy from there. But I just don't know a whole lot about, these platformer games because they're not that remarkable on the N64. It's another genre that got cranked out ad infinitum on the system, and they don't stand the test of time. And there's several of the big hit ones that I don't even have in my collection. You're not going to see Donkey Kong 64 and stuff like that because I didn't have any attachment to those. I would much rather play those games, their older versions in 2D. All right. Well, I've been ranting about games and stuff I don't like on the system. Let's talk about one I do like. This was my title image for the stream today, which is probably one of my all-time favorites on this crappy system known as the N64. Oh, hey, McFly has joined the chat. What's going on, man? Matt is a huge Ghost of Tsushima fan, I see. Tsushima. Can't say. I'm really good at speaking Japanese, like, syllables, except for the TSU, I even took Japanese, and that was, like, the one that my teacher would get so mad at me because I couldn't pronounce it. Like, I had other bumblehead kids in the class, and they had no problems with it. It was, like, the one that couldn't do it. Anyways, I don't like that game just because it has that character in it I don't like. So, let's talk about this game. This game's cool. This is our good friends at Treasure. This one is the Japanese exclusive. Yeah, McFly, this is a rant and collection video of the N64. It's a system I just don't love enough to devote a quality video to, so I'm doing a crappy stream and just kind of hating along the way in general and sharing some memories about the N64 because I just don't really care for this console. But I do have, some games in my library on it, so I figured I'd talk about it. But Sin and Punishment is a really cool shooter, like 3D into the screen type shooter, I guess is the best way to put it. It's kind of like Space Harrier style in a way. And unfortunately, this game did remain Japanese exclusive, which is a huge shame. I think this game would have come out here. It just was kind of a late release in Japan. This one came out in 2000, I think. And I remember buying this import like as soon as I could get it from my local import shop. They they sold a lot of these in my market. I remember when I would buy games from him, he would say like, man, I moved like 3 copies of that import game. That was a hit for me. Like some of these games, it was just such a niche thing to buy import games back in the late 90s, early 2000s. I remember him buying like, I think I bought this from his initial case of 6 or whatever he ordered, and it sold out so fast, and he just kept ordering them. And it was a slow burner. Like people bought this game for years. And I almost would say that they probably sold more copies as imports in the US than they may have in Japan of this game, because this game was very popular amongst Japanese importers of the time. All the early companies that used to exist on the web, like you would always see this in their banner ads, like, we have Sin and Punishment. You can't get that in America. You got to import it, blah, blah, blah. And this game probably sold more import converters than anything else on the N64. So I would say it's definitely not rare by any means, but it's a very cool game. TJ Kasune is also on board with hating on the N64. Good. I'm glad I got some more people that are just like, whatever to the system. But if you're going to play something on it, you might as well play this, because this is a really neat game. They did finally give us a Sin and Punishment game in the US, but it was on the Wii, so that's a whole other system I need to do a console video on, and I'm just not finding the energy to do it because the Wii is such a hit or miss console too. But at least it has a broader library. I will say that about the Wii. I will not hate on the Wii to the extent that I hate on the N64, because at least no matter how much shovelware is on the Wii, you can find something that you like that is a unique genre on that system, because they really did have a broad library. McFly's with me. He agrees the N64 is garbage. He just thinks we're too old when it came out to develop a nostalgia feeling for the system. Yeah, I mean, it was just weird. Like, I was so diehard NES and Super Nintendo, and then you would think I would be a natural customer for the N64, but maybe it just had like a baby feel to it or something, and I was such a cool, badass teenager at the time. I didn't have time for that. I was so into my PS1 and my Saturn. I don't know. But anyways, Sin and Punishment's rad. You should definitely get this game. It's fun. It's frantic. It uses the N64 controller pretty well. Oh, we haven't even talked about that yet. What the hell? The N64 controller is terrible. It's absolutely terrible. Like, there's no way to find comfort in holding that controller. And, you've got so many kids that play that system, but the controller is like a beast. I mean, it's huge. And unless you have that like little Japanese, like cute little mini controller that Hori put out, I don't even know how small kids' hands held that controller. It's just such a clunky piece of crap. How's it going, Carlito X? Hope you're doing well. So yeah, N64 controller is a joke. Oh, here's another thing that's a complete joke about the N64 controller. So we already kind of talked a little bit about the rumble packs. I mean, yeah, they were novel at the time. It was like, oh, cool, the controller rumbles, but you had to feed it batteries and you had to snap it into the controller. And then some games require, maybe this is one of them. It doesn't look like it is. Some games require what is known as a controller pack, which I don't know why they didn't call it a memory pack or something like that, but some games had internal memory in the cartridge, which they should have because they're cartridges. It's really easy to slap a battery in a cartridge and let the cartridge save. Other games required you to buy the separate controller pack. So you had to buy this other little device to pop in the controller. But it wasn't smart like the Dreamcast controller with two separate slots. So you could either rumble or you could control pack, and you couldn't do both. And so some of the games knew that they wanted to have both features and were lazy enough to not put a battery in the cartridge to let you save your game. So they would have menu prompts that would pop up, and it's like, game is paused. Put in your controller pack now so you can save your progress. And then, don't push OK until you remove the controller pack and put the rumble pack back in to resume the rumble feature of the game. It's like, what a clunky, stupid idea that was. And you had, again, PS1, like they got it right. They didn't have the DualShock when the system first launched, but when it came out, it was like a marvel. Like, you didn't have to feed it batteries. It was self-contained. You didn't have to snap anything into it. Obviously, memory cards were still a thing, but at least they went into the console and not into the controller. Maybe that was where Nintendo got it wrong. They should have just put the memory card slot in the console, not in the controller. I think that was a really stupid move. Yeah, TJ Katsune agrees the controller's crap. And McFly says, PS1 and Saturn came out, and so the kiddie feel destroyed the system in his eyes. And the Saturn, obviously didn't have rumble, and their memory card thing was kind of jank also because you had onboard memory in the system, but it wasn't enough, and the batteries would die out quick, and then you could buy memory cards, but if you were like me and you needed to also use your import converter, you couldn't do both at the same time. And then my import converter was like a janky memory card also, but it really wasn't. It just was saving flash images of the memory or whatever, and then they would disappear off the cartridge at like a drop of a hat. So it wasn't ideal either. So a lot of teething pains for memory cards. I'm not going to say Nintendo was the only one that didn't have it figured out, but I just think it was such a stupid idea to have the memory cards go into the controller and not the system, because they already knew they wanted to have other accessories that went into the controller. And it wasn't just the rumble pack. You had things like the microphone that worked with a few games. I want to say there was some other thing. Was it like a link cable, or it was the GBA, link thingy that should have been a GBA player, but it really wasn't. Or not GBA, GB Game Boy, original Game Boy adapter for the controllers that you had to use for data transfer to the Pokemon games or whatever. So I don't know. You got one port and you're using it for all this stuff. It was just dumb. I cannot get with the N64 controller. I probably would like this library if I was comfortable playing the games. And every time I have to play that stupid controller, I don't know. I can't get with it. McFly says it was the worst ever invented. Even the Jaguar controller was better. Wow. Yeah, that's pretty harsh. I don't know if I would go with worst ever, because you had stuff like the CDI, remote controller thingy that wasn't real effective. But I don't know. The 90s was not peak of controller design in a lot of ways. There was a lot of systems that had problems. And McFly, I definitely agree. The Saturn controller was, once you got past the initial Saturn controller, it was perfection. The Saturn Model 2 controller is wonderful. It is the model of a perfect 2D fighting game controller. I used to use that Saturn controller on my Dreamcast for games that supported it. I could use a pass-through and play it with that. And, Saturn was unique in that they had the 3D analog controller before that became commonplace. It didn't rumble, but it had a nice analog feature for the few games that supported it. So, well, anyway, I've kind of strayed off the topic, but Sin and Punishment does not suck, and it is worth dealing with the awful N64 controller for the experience of playing it. Maybe someday we'll get this on some kind of collection and you won't need this anymore, but I do think that this is one of the reasons to own an N64 is for this game. Like, I think this game did sell consoles for people that were really on the fence, because this appealed to the group that was looking for like more of a adult hardcore, shooter type game that just wasn't on the console. The PS1 had plenty of games like this, and then you just couldn't get stuff like this on the N64. So people like me just weren't turned on to the console, and this game finally came out, and it was like, oh, okay, now there actually is something for us. And then, 6 months after this game came out, the system essentially was dead. So it was too little, too late, but it's a great game. Let's look at something else. We talked about that one for a little too long. So next up, we're going to talk about this game, which I do have a little love for. This is Space Station Silicon Valley. Pretty recent purchase for me. I got this last year as well, I believe. This was one I pieced together. It is complete now. The box is a little bit smushy, but it's a really cool game to have complete. Very, very, very British game. Very loaded with British humor, which I'm not necessarily always on board with, but it fits this game very well. It has, weird like cutscenes with mumble dialogue, but then like all the captions on the bottom are actually really funny. If you like obtuse British humor. I think this game was a little bit too brainy for the average kid to figure out what the hell was going on. It's kind of a strange like evolution sim in a way, and that you have to like possess different characters throughout your way in this game, and then you build yourself up to more powerful characters to achieve the objectives of the levels. I kind of like the level design in this game. I think that's one of the things it does well. That like they're pretty creative. They use the strengths of the different characters that you have to possess as you go through the levels, and like you may have to switch the character multiple times to get through different obstacles. And there's some things that can climb ladders, and there's some things that can crawl across water and whatnot. That whole mechanic. It's just a very weird game. Like, I don't think this game sold well. It was one of the early games by DMA, or Doesn't Mean Anything, which was a kind of publisher of the moment for the late 90s that they thought was going to be huge. I think they merged into Rockstar at some point, so like maybe some remnants of that went on to make Grand Theft Auto. I don't know. But anyway, I normally don't like European developed games. I think I almost have like a bias against most of them, just because they kind of have a clunky, like computery type feel, like kind of that Amiga syndrome, things like that. But this one I would get on board with for sure. One thing I would like to get, it never came out in the US, but there is a European Game Boy Color version of this game. And I think I've heard pretty good things about it, that it actually stretches the system pretty well and things like that. So I'd like to get that. I don't even know what it goes for anymore. I haven't looked it up in a long time, but I think they were hoping this was going to become a big franchise, and then it didn't, especially not in America, where this game was just a little bit too weird for most people to get into. But I do think that this is neat, that this is a console exclusive. So at least it's got that going for it. The system has, a few little redeeming glimpses of hope like this amongst all the licensed crap and kart racing games in general, and generic fighting games. I think maybe that's a whole other thing about the N64 that just was very disappointing, is like, outside of one game we're going to talk about that's kind of an exception because it's cartoony. Name me a classic fighting game on the N64, at least one that's serious in tone. I mean, there were Tekken ripoffs and Street Fighter ripoffs and just 3D generic ripoffs, but none of them really stuck. The PS1 was the system to go to for 3D fighters, I would say, at the era, and Saturn was definitely the go-to for 2D fighters, especially all the great Capcom games. So I think that's just, like little things like that is where the N64 went astray, is they didn't have a grasp on certain genres of games that people expected from a console that was going to be accessible to a lot of different audiences, not just kids. But anyway, I digress. It's a little bit about Space Station Silicon Valley. I would recommend that one. Another one I got last year, this wasn't really planned or anything like that, I just happened to find a good deal on a complete copy, is Spider-Man for the N64. This is a decent game, but it wasn't maximized for the N64 in any way, shape, or form. This game was built from the ground up as a PS1 title, and it actually really pushed that hardware pretty well. It was developed by the same team that made the Tony Hawk Pro developer at the time, so not only was it like, one of the efforts of Marvel to have like good quality developers making their games versus prior, when it was a little more touch and go. But I think there was a lot of excitement on this game for the PS1, and then, obviously N64 had to have its own version of it, so they brought it over to this system, and this was not done by Neversoft. This was done by a team I've never even heard of called Edge of Reality. So they did the port job. Why this game doesn't really work on the N64 is that the PS1 game was also designed with a pretty cool story and cutscenes between the levels. And this one they had to just make because, let's talk about another drawback of the N64. You can't do proper full motion video on a cartridge-based system like this and have it be successful, at least compared to a CD-based medium that gives you almost infinite storage as compared to these cartridges. So instead of the great cutscenes that the PS1 version had of this game, they chopped it down into like comic book stills. They tried to stylize it and make it not look crappy, but it's not the same game without the videos. And I just think that's one of the big drawbacks of the N64, not only for this, it's why we didn't get another genre that was really missing from this hardware was RPGs. Like there was not a large RPG library even in Japan for the N64 because you couldn't pull off the technology that the Saturn and PS1 were already doing when this console came out. And the Saturn and PS1 were powerhouses for RPGs because they really made them, more cinematic, and you could put great CD quality music, which is another touchstone of RPGs, which is yet another drawback of this console is you can't get great music out of a cartridge to the same extent that you could from those CD-based consoles. So I just think this game is a good case in point. It's not a classic by any means, but it's a good case in point of, yeah, it's an okay game. I mean, there's nothing theoretically wrong with the gameplay in this game, but why would you play it on this system when you could play it on the PS1? And then if you want to go beyond that, this game also came out on the Dreamcast. So you have a Dreamcast version of it with slightly boosted graphics and things like that you can play, and it has all the cutscenes intact and stuff like that too. So perfect example of just, how like even a game that was multi-platform during this time usually got chopped down in some way, shape, or form on the N64, or they had to add more fog because the system got clunky if it tried to do like a big open space, and all those weak drawbacks of the system. Big Fly says, Killer Instinct as far as a fighter. Yeah, I mean, I guess I could get with that. I wasn't a huge Killer Instinct fan from the get-go, but at least it's solid and it is exclusive to the console, so I can give Killer Instinct a few points for the N64. I don't know. We got a lot of people in the chat, but I feel like I might be boring people. So if there's something else you guys want to chime in on, or your thoughts on the N64, I'll get some opinions. Maybe you have a different history, or maybe you do think there are some redeeming games or some things I'm missing out on here. I really only have about 5 more games to show. It's not, like I said, I don't have a huge library for the system. But we'll talk about my next one here. This one is a cool one. It's weird. So the N64 has essentially one shooter on the US library. So that's another weakness of it is I love classic 2D style space shooters, and the N64 just was not having it. And I honestly don't think it was a limitation issue. Like I think the N64 could probably pull off a 2D shooter fine. And I think it was more Nintendo just having like direction to even their third parties that they didn't want them making 2D games. This was the N64. It's 64 bits of power. you better put in 3D games with fogs, and there better be some licensed characters, and there better be some carts, or it's not going to sell in this system. So, developers were really discouraged to make a game like this, even in Japan. Like, there just aren't a lot of 2D shooters for the system. And this one's kind of like a quasi 3D, I should say. It's like 2D, but like on an angled plane. So you kind of like go up at an angle. It's not like a isometric. I don't want to say that, but it just kind of has a perspective shift to make you think it's a more advanced game that it might not be. But honestly, like, I like this game. I don't think it's part of the Star Soldier series, which is obviously very long running, back to the Famicom and the NES and was it arcade? No, it wasn't arcade. Famicom was really where the Star Soldier series started. You had the original in there. It then moved to the PC Engine and TurboGrafx. There's several Star Soldier games on that system, and they're all really great. And then you had some other oddball systems that you got Star Soldier adjacent games. You had it wasn't called Star Soldier, but essentially was a Star Soldier game for the Virtual Boy, which was Vertical Force. And then it moved on to this, and it was like, okay, well, let's see what the big N64 can do. And so this game is kind of unique because it runs on, it was actually, I believe there was an arcade version of this, very little known, which ran on the ALEC 64 hardware that Nintendo co-developed with a company called SETA. And, N64 games in the arcade flopped because they just didn't lend to an arcadey environment in any way, shape, or form. They tried to make a few games that were more classic arcade style like this. We'll see, I guess, if they could get some inroads into the arcade markets. May have been a way to keep up with PS1 as well, because you had, the Namco System 12, I think it is, board that is based on PS1 architecture. So System 10 or 12, whatever it is. So maybe they just felt like, well, we need to have an arcadeized version of the N64 to run games in that market, and then hopefully bring games easily home because the systems are essentially the same. But this game, like I say, it is loyal to the series. It has one of the things I like about some of the early Star Soldier games is you have these like 2-minute or 5-minute caravan mode, so you could just like really hone in on high score attacks. Does it say on here? I can't remember if it has both or if it just has one of them. But I really like that. I'm pretty sure it's in here. I don't know. I play a lot of Star Soldier games, so I may be wrong about that. But I like that because even after you've kind of gone through the main mission of the general game itself, you can always just like endlessly challenge your scores in those caravan modes. So it's kind of really cool when they add those in. The Star Soldier series kind of petered out after this, but they did have one more game, which was a remake of the original that came out on the Japanese GameCube, the Japanese PS2, and the Japanese PSP. We didn't get any of them here in the US, but we got all three of those imports. I have the Japanese GameCube for PSP. We didn't get any of them here in the US, but we got all three of those imports. I have the Japanese GameCube version, and that one, I know that one has a great caravan mode because I played it extensively. I was in like a online high score competition in that game when it first came out, and they like had a whatever it was, a top 10 in the world score at the time on some forum, and I thought it was really cool. But definitely have a weak spot for this series. I think it's neat that we got an exclusive. Nobody really talks about this game. I just don't think they sold many. The other thing I think that hurt this game is it was a Hudson Soft property, which I'm a huge Hudson Soft fan in general. But Hudson Soft didn't really publish their own games on the N64 in the US, so they've trusted third parties to put them out, or even Nintendo themselves in some cases. And this game got, I'll see if I can show their logo because it's ridiculous. This game got put out by Electro Brain, a company that actually had been around since the NES days, but this was not really a sign of quality when you saw Electro Brain. And so, they had poor distribution. I don't think this game really had much of a chance. But I really like it. Like I said, I don't think that, this is going to be most people's first choice for an N64 game, but I would probably put this in my top 5 because I definitely think this is a neat one. Just checking this chat. So McFly had some ideas. He said, do you think fog or the controller was the weakest drawback of the system? For me, it was probably the controller. I think that, that was the piece that we were all stuck with. The fog was more just developer laziness or ineptitude, and maybe had the system lasted longer, they would have found some tricks to work around that, or the expansion pack could have been more utilized to help with that, or they could have come out with another enhancement. Maybe add more RAM to the cartridges or something like that to make them more effective. But Nintendo is not known to re-engineer their controllers, which we have seen with other companies like Microsoft and Sony have done that over time. But usually Nintendo is like very pig-headed. They're like, no, this is our vision of perfection for this console, and this is what people want to use as their interface. So I think that definitely hurt the system because, again, like a 2D fighter just doesn't work on that controller. At least not what we're used to with a lot of the other systems. Some other things McFly says, as far as the N64 is concerned, the only nostalgia aspect he has with the system is, of course, Goldeneye, which I talked about before you hopped on, and then also South Park. The reason being he had friends play back then, and then the 4-player aspect. So, yeah, I covered that a little bit earlier too, but I definitely agree. I think the one of the cool things about the N64, I don't want to totally bag on the system, was the 4-player controller ports built into the hardware without having to have a multi-tap. I definitely think that was a win, and it encouraged developers to do stuff like that and make games that really supported like the split screen aspect and be able to play with multiple people. But I guess it was kind of, like, especially if you were buying this stuff new, it was kind of a rich kid system because the controllers were, I think they were 40 a piece when they were new, maybe even 45, which nowadays is cheap for a controller, but like back then that was very, very premium. PS1 DualShocks were $29.95 MSRP, and Saturn controllers I think were that or even less. And so you had Nintendo saying, "Well, no, our controllers are 40 or 45 bucks," and that makes it tough. If you got a family and you got a few kids, or they want to have some friends over, and suddenly you got to spend $160 or more on 4 controllers, like that adds up quick. So I think it was kind of a blessing and a curse that it had the 4-player function because, it was great that some of the developers built games around it, but how many people really used it, and maybe how many people couldn't even afford to use it just because it wasn't cost effective to have all that equipment. And also those N64 controllers are bulky nightmares. So like, where do you store them all whenever like you're done playing with them? But yeah, I don't know. I just think those are like other little factors that are kind of annoying about the hardware. Got a few more games to talk about here, but again, just kind of open to see what else you guys think. Any other games you played on the N64 that you are nostalgic for? Because maybe there are some things that I'm missing. There's a lot of very well-known games in the system that I do not own, either because I just have no interest in them or I just don't have nostalgia in them to know I need to get them. I agree, McFly. Yeah, so like not only are you paying 40 plus bucks for the controller, but it wasn't even a good controller. So I guess it is time to talk about this game. So this is another one I do not have complete. I just have it in one of my little storage boxes. Obviously a very well-known game for the system. Probably felt like I needed to own it more out of obligation than fandom, but this is Mario 64. Which obviously was like, the reason to buy an N64 when it finally came out super late as hell. I still was big on my Super Nintendo when N64 launched. I didn't feel the need to upgrade. One of my friends did have an N64 with this game at launch. And then I think he sold it, honestly. Like soon after that, he just didn't get super into the console like he thought he would. So I would go over to his house and we would play this. And I just was like, this isn't good. Like, it's just these wide open spaces, and it's more of a tech demo than a game. It felt like to me. It did not feel like it felt very, very strange playing Mario in 3D once you'd grown up playing all 2D Mario games. Obviously, this was the direction they went in for many, many years after and continued to go in, but this was jarring for people that had only played 2D Mario games. And I didn't get it. And I'll tell you the other thing is that I was huge on Super Mario World 2 Yoshi's Island for Super Nintendo, and that game didn't come out that long before this did. So I was probably still playing that game religiously, and I'm like, I'm not even ready for a new Mario game yet. I still have Yoshi's Island, and it's excellent. Like, I absolutely love Yoshi's Island. I think it's probably one of my top 2 Mario games ever. So, not only was this game super delayed, and the console was delayed, and the graphics were completely underwhelming and just unsettling for me at the time because I wasn't ready for 3D platformers. To some extent, I still am not. But Yoshi's Island still had my attention. I was like, well, whatever, I'll get that later because I still got a great Mario game to play now. And I would definitely pick up Yoshi's Island before this any day if I just wanted to pop in and play some Mario. So anyway, I never bought this game new. I never had, it wasn't like I threw out the box or anything like that. This is one I bought used years later. I think I found this one in a flea market and have never even bothered to get it complete because it's just kind of like, well, I'll keep it in my library. It's not like I want to get rid of it, but I just don't have any feelings for this one. And it probably killed Mario for me in general. Like, I liked a few of the newer Mario games that went back to the 2D style. So you had the Mario Brothers on the Wii, New Super Mario Brothers. I thought that game was great, and I liked the DS version of it too. So I don't know. I can't get into something that I had very big attachments to as a kid as a 2D character. Like I can't move into that shift. Another thing I didn't like about this game, I guess I'll talk about that too, was the character voices. I just thought were stupid. Like, I didn't like the voice that they gave Mario, and like, the little interludes they had when you turned it on and stuff like that. I just thought it was corny. Like, maybe Mario doesn't need to talk. Maybe, all those other great Mario games did not have Mario talking, so I don't need that from this game. Like, I just don't. But you can correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just like crazy that Mario 64 did not click for me. And then really all the rest of the 3D platformers that the system had a ton of, there aren't, I showed a couple in this video, but there's really not like any affinity for those, and I never track them down. Some other thoughts from McFly said the only other game that he liked on the N64 20 years after the system came out was Mario 64. So he did get into this game, I guess, late on, but he never owned a 64 until 20 years after release. Okay. Only because he hated the system, playing it on friend systems. That's why the only nostalgia are the games that he played, such as Goldeneye and South Park. And so tell me what I'm missing then, I guess, if you do like this game. Like, why is this worth my time, and what enabled you to make that transition from this if you were, more in the mode of all the 2D Marios like I was, if that was your background, what you played. Obviously today too, like, this game is not really that critical if you have something like a Switch because it's been remade and repackaged on that. And I think there's like a 3DS version of this and stuff like that. So Nintendo has milked this game multiple times since it came out. And so again, like, it's not even a reason to own an N64 anymore and put up with the whole horrible controller, because you could play this on other consoles, probably with more ease and portability and stuff like that. So, but anyways, that's my little mini thoughts on Super Mario 64, which is obviously a sacred cow for many people, but I just don't get it. Let's see, what do we have next? I can get this game back in the case. This is one of the cases that don't fit well. Okay. All right, so what do we got next here? Oh, another big popular title of the system. So McFly says the redeeming piece of Mario 64 is throwing a penguin off a cliff. I'm not going to get on board with that because I think penguins are a treasure of retro gaming, and there's so much Japanese affinity for penguins that were well taken care of in the games. You have stuff like Penguin Land and what's the game that just got remade for PS4 that I got hooked on? Penguin games. They love penguins for some reason, but most of them are good, and penguins are cool. So here's another one that is like a sacred cow of the N64. I actually like this game. Okay, I mean, I wouldn't like seek it out or get in this crazy tournament mode with this game or anything like that. A lot of people do. But this is the original Smash Brothers. I did have this game whenever it first came out. It was one of the few N64 titles I sought out new because I was like, ooh, finally a Nintendo character action game that is for the ostensibly a 2D game. It plays on a 2D plane. And I thought it was kind of, neat and creative at the time. It's like, well, we're not going to get any real serious fighting games in the system, so let's see what they can do to make use of their properties and give us something different to play. So I agree that it just got me in the Nintendo nostalgia pocket when it first came out because it had music and characters from lots of their classic games that I knew and loved, and brought in like bonus weapons from obscure titles and things like that weren't big enough to have a character in the game, but ultimately they had little random appearances for people that knew their Nintendo trivia. So I got pretty wrapped up in that. I mean, they do that kind of crap all the time right now, but it was kind of unique at the time, I guess, having that nostalgia trip for some of the earlier Nintendo properties and history and stuff like that. Ultimately, though, why this game is loose is that I did buy this game when it was new, and ultimately I got bored with it, and so I just sold it, which back then especially, I didn't sell a lot of my games. There must have been something else new and exciting I wanted to get that I decided to sell my complete copy of Smash, and then rebought it years later loose and just was like, oh, I'll piece it together and get a complete copy, but I never did. And I'm happy enough with this. I mean, like I said, I'm not going to play this constantly, so it's fine having it loose. But I think this is an okay title for the N64, and obviously Smash has now been milked to death, and some people are incredibly hardcore about the series, like traveling across the country to participate in Smash tournaments. I'm not going to hate on you if that's what you like to do, but I was not that into this game by any means. It was, just a passing nostalgia fad, and then I moved on to the next thing. So I think the GameCube game is pretty good too. I had that one when it came out new. This one was kind of like a mid-period N64 game, but the GameCube one was really early, and so I was still kind of, fresh from playing this on the N64. And then I got a GameCube, and that game came out, and I was like, oh, I should probably get that. But then after that, the series lost interest to me. They, milked it to death. They put it on every console. You couldn't even find a valid criticism of the series because all the early reviews were just pale and Nintendo stuff that everyone was saying, oh my God, it's the best thing ever. And then, it'd be one of those things that the reviewer was never found again because a month later they were on to something else and never played it again. But that's kind of a whole other story. It was the early internet fake game media news about just how certain titles you could definitely tell they were being pumped to give positive reviews, and Nintendo. I guess that's another thing we should talk about from this era that just sparked a whole other thing. Let me check the chat now. I'll go off on a tangent here because I just thought of something else I wanted to talk about why I don't like the system. So a couple other thoughts from McFly's is he thinks the reason Mario 64 is enduring is that out of all the games on the 64, it's the only game that the controller makes sense. I can see that, and I guess it's kind of annoying in that same sense because it's almost like they built the controller to work with that game, and then nobody else could figure out the formula to make that controller make sense or use it in a useful way that was different. So, yeah, I could agree. Yeah, okay, I see what you mean. You like Power Stone better than Smash? Yeah, I mean, I like Power Stone series. I think that they like if Capcom wanted to make Power Stone better, they would have used all their franchise characters rather than creating a whole new franchise. I'm not against them having like a new group, of characters, but I just don't think the characters in that series were that memorable. The gameplay is fine, and I think it's cool that it does all the 4-player stuff in part 2 at least. But yeah, I mean, Smash at least had the recognizable franchises. I think okay, I'll give you another reason I think that this is more enduring is that if I had a bunch of random casual people over and said, hey, let's play Power Stone, they would look at me like I had two heads. but I could pull this out and people would want to play it. So like even somebody that normally doesn't play games would at least entertain the idea of picking up this game, which I think if you're going to do a 4-player game, you almost have to have it a little bit more normie like that to get people into playing it. So kind of a nice perk of that. But let's talk about another annoying thing about the N64 era and Nintendo's marketing decisions. So as I said before, I did work at a video game store when this console was new. Not when it launched, but kind of during the mid period of its days. And I looked at the difference in how we were treated as a store by representatives of the companies at the time. We had Sony reps that would come into our stores, and they were like just basically backing a truck up to the front door and saying like, what do you want? What freebies, what swag do you want? We just want to get our brand out there. Like you can have t-shirts and pins and lanyards and I don't know, game displays, action figures, whatever, you name it, banners. Like they gave us so much cool stuff, not only for like us personally, like I was obviously the perk of working there, but for the store. Like they wanted to make sure that their brand was recognized in the store, and they wanted to roll out the red carpet, let people know that PlayStation 1 was here to stay. It's a viable console. It's got this vast library. We want people to know like all the cool games that you can get and some of the exclusives and also some of the advantages of the PS1 over something like the N64. So they really played up like the video and things like that the games could do with FMV and whatnot, and music and all that. They gave us demo discs, and it wasn't just for us. It was like here's 100 copies of a demo disc for Demolition Racer 2. Just give them out to customers. Like great, like people would like that. That's a very positive thing to do for your customer, just to give them a free sample of the game. They don't even have to buy a demo disc. You're just saying, here's something free you can take with your purchase and check out another game you might be interested in. So my point with sharing that story is like Sony was very retailer friendly in their dealings. They were okay with going to a small store. I wasn't a big box store that I worked at, so they were willing to come in and spend some time with us, and especially my manager, like they would make sure that they were getting their deliveries on time and that the order prices were acceptable, and all the business angle of it. Like they were really in tune with that too. So I just tell that story because Sony was very retailer friendly, and Nintendo, especially during this era, and probably still today. I don't work in game retail anymore, so I can't comment. But they were very unfriendly to our size of business. They saw basically no reason to ever work the account or send a representative to the store. I think I saw a Nintendo representative maybe one time. And to ever work the account or send a representative to the store. I think I saw a Nintendo representative maybe one time. They were very poor with their promotional material for games. So they would send us a poster for a game that had been on the market for 3 weeks. And it's like, ship has sailed, like you got to get the posters up for a new release weeks in advance of the game coming out. That's a horrible miss if you're trying to actually get people excited about something that you want them to buy that they cannot buy yet, and you want them to come back and buy it the next time they're in the store. So that was really stupid. And then the other thing I didn't like about Nintendo's practices is how they handled their demo games. So another huge drawback of this console is you couldn't just print demo discs like you could for the PS1 and give people demos, and they're cheap and affordable because they're just a generic CD with some data on it. These cartridges obviously cost a lot more money to make, so they didn't do something like that where they just made piles of demo cartridges with a level or two of the game. So fans missed out on that experience. Again, it was very hard to try out a new game without renting it if you were on a budget. Or you were faced with, again, those high MSRP games, $74.99, stuff like that. And then they just didn't have a way to, broadcast demos to the public. And obviously the internet, you couldn't download games and stuff like that yet. So what they would do with demos is they would ship our store or other retailers a, NFR, as they're called now, or not for resale cartridge. And they would put the little not for resale logo on the cartridge. And honestly, I'm a little surprised at how many of those are on the market today, because back then it was like on lockdown. They would mail a not for resale cartridge to the store. They had, like extensive delivery protections. So like you had to have the manager present and they had to sign for the game from FedEx, or they wouldn't release it to you. They would not release it to just anybody in the store. They wanted to know exactly who signed for the game because they were accountable for that game being in the store. And then we would put it in the demo unit. Um, they had a strict timeline for how long the game could be in the store. So it wasn't like you had discretion to say, I'm going to see how this Yoshi's story does in my store and determine whether it's a good idea to have that on display. They would be like, you're going to have this game on display for 36 days, and then we want that cartridge back. So we had to mail those cartridges back before they would give us the next one. And I just think that, again, it's kind of surprising how many of those are on the market, because at the time, like, we didn't get to keep those. They didn't end up getting resold in the store. They went right back to Nintendo, and then I guess at some point they just sold them off, maybe centrally, and that's how they got flooded out in the market. But anyway, long-winded anecdote to just really say that Nintendo's promotion at the time for being retailer-friendly sucked. Especially in comparison to Sony, that was very eager to get their hands on this market. They knew that they were, kind of the new kid on the block, and they had to do some things differently. And being retailer friendly was one of the things that Sony was all about. Nintendo was all about just, we're the known party here. We're going to get your money regardless. We don't have to do anything to wine and dine you, and you better feel lucky that we let you carry our product in your stores because it has the Nintendo seal of quality, and that's all that matters. So I just think, again, like another miss of this era. Things got better as far as the demo aspect once you moved on to things like the GameCube, and they could actually make demos. They weren't super common, but there were, at least some of those discs that were presented that fans could at least try out some of the games before they bought them. So that was kind of my experience, and just another reason that I think that Nintendo missed the boat. I mean, if you think about like my store that I worked at, the people that bought the most loyal customers that bought the most game in the store were the people that worked there. So if you piss us off, like, we're not going to say nice things about your product. I think that was another thing. Like, they failed to see the writing on the wall. And some people that were more gullible, like, you throw some Post-it notes at your employees that have branding for your game on there, you might be like, oh, have you tried this game? Because I want to get more free stuff. So I was not swayed by things like that, but I am telling you, there was definitely a vibe that some people were. But yeah, it was just a little bit about my time in the retail game industry at the time when dealing with Nintendo, and really not dealing with Nintendo because they didn't want to give us a time of their own. I only have 2 more games to talk about, so I guess we'll have to move on to something else, or we'll have to wrap it up, one or the other. But these are well-known games for the system, so no real shockers here. We, of course, have the Zelda games. This is my Zelda Link to the Past, or not Link to the Past, Ocarina of Time, sorry. Ocarina of Time, this is the the limited foil version. What is it, the collector's edition? I did buy this brand new day one. Like, I was there for the launch. It was crazy. We sold a ton of copies of this in my store. Nintendo actually did give us adequate supply, which gives me another example of why N64 shot themselves in the foot. Is and this is Nintendo's same behaviors today. There's nothing different. Is they would purposely limit the supply of games that went to the stores with a higher demand, knowing that way they could extend the sales of it for a longer amount of time and not just be the flavor of the week. Clearly, they intend to do that tactic today, because whether they say it or not, they do the same crap today. And they know that it just builds pent-up demand. But now we're in the era of reselling, and so it also just lends itself to scalpers, which was not really such a thing back then, but it is definitely now. But this one, I will say relatively nice things about. This, I do have nostalgia for, because I did buy it in the late 90s. I did voraciously play this game. I beat it. It's one of the few Zelda games that I have played all the way to the end. Generally, I thought this game made me, convinced that 3D could be viable for some genres. So while I don't really like 3D platformer games, I think that this one had just that nice action RPG balance that it worked pretty well. And kind of to the point earlier, this was a game that did take advantage of the N64 controller pretty well as far as how it mapped out some of the secondary weapons and pickups and things like that you could use the yellow arrow buttons for and stuff like that. So I think that this is a pretty neat one overall. I don't know if I would have the same feelings about it today if I popped it in, but I definitely have some history with this one. And I remember poring over a strategy guide when I got really stuck in one spot in this game, but ultimately was able to get through it. So happy to have this nice original copy of this. I would never sell this. This one, again, I have some history with and nostalgia. And I think that this probably sold a lot of systems for Nintendo. I think, a lot of people were waiting on this game. This was extensively delayed, as many of the games were that we talked about in this video. I think this game was supposed to come out in 97, and I don't think it came out till 98. I'm just checking the box, but I think I'm right about that. Doesn't say. But I think this was supposed to be initially it was going to be a Final Fantasy VII fighter in 97, and then ultimately it got super delayed, and it almost looked a little long in the tooth by the time it came out, but in some aspects. But very neat. I think it brought enough new to the table that it justified being 3D, and obviously inspired a lot of Zelda games that have come since then that I'm not nearly as attached to. There was kind of a period that I felt like I wanted to have all the Zelda games and I just need them all in my collection, but then it just got out of control, and now there's all these side story Zelda games and all this crap. And so I just had to draw the line at some point and say, I just really want some of the true ones that I played back in the day, or at least that I think it would be ones I would enjoy, and I don't need some of these side tangents that they have with the Zelda series. So, but definitely happy I have this one, because like I say, I've played this one extensively, and it was neat to get this on day one and be part of the hype and the mania and all that with it. So McFly says he's never played a Zelda on the N64. He has them, just doesn't know if it's the N64 or the controller. Turned me off on those two games. Yeah, I mean, I would say, if you're going to play one, that's the one to go for. And again, it might not be the same today, but at the time it was unique. I guess the other thing is I'd already played Final Fantasy VII by the time that came out, and that game was so groundbreaking. And I was like, oh my god, this is what the PS1 is going to be known for forever, because this just moved the needle on gaming in general. And then this game came out, and I was like, honestly, this game kind of moved the needle on gaming too at the time. It felt really of its own, and it had its own aesthetic to it. And I think they did a lot of cool things with it. So, another piece of that game that was cool is that you have the music limitations of the N64 cartridges, but then they still found a way to build memorable music into that game with the short ocarina playing segments and things like that, where you had to play a melody on the ocarina. And I just think that was kind of neat. They knew they couldn't do full CD quality music, but they did that so that at least it had something you would associate the music in the game with once you return to it down the road. Sorry, I'm allergy tonight. I feel like I'm rubbing my nose a lot. So the last game I have in my N64 library, I wasn't even sure if I was going to walk through all these, but I decided to, is the other Zelda game for the N64. So this is Majora's Mask. What's funny is after I was all excited about Ocarina and I played it to the end and had all that love for it, when this game came out, it was like a complete disconnect. I had zero interest in getting this game. I thought that number one, it was delayed extensively again. So, probably was interested when it first got announced. And then by the time it came out, I think in 2000, this was one of the kind of getting into the later releases of the system. It just didn't have the same energy. Since I never really got attached to the N64, I never had the expansion pack. So I was like, well, not only do I have to buy the $70 Zelda game, but I got to buy a $35 expansion pack just to play it. I don't know if I want to spend $100 on this. So this was, I just had a lot of repellent to it when it first came out. I even think the box art's kind of ugly. It didn't have anything cool and gold about. Well, I'm sorry, there is a collector's version of this one. This is not the collector's version, but I just thought the box was not nearly as cool. But yeah, and then like once I really read up on it and read reviews, they were a little bit more mixed. Like Ocarina was almost a universal acclaim. Almost everybody had to love that game. This one was like, if it didn't say Zelda on it, would I like this? So I just think that this one they went a little wild with the story. And I did not buy this game until last year. This was something I bought last year and finally got an expansion pack because I had to for this game, and then decided to play a few of the other games in this pile that do support the expansion pack. But this is a game that I guess I'm glad I played it now with fresh eyes, like because I think if I had got it back then, I probably would have been super disappointed and just sold it anyways. It is a very different game than Ocarina of Time, and it's funny. It has this whole Groundhog Day style mechanic where you just have to keep reliving your day over and over until you get it right, essentially. But if you really think about it, like Groundhog Day, the movie was fun to watch Bill Murray living that misery and all the different wacky things that would happen each version of the day. But do you think it was fun for Bill Murray being that person living every day the same day? Because it kind of has that effect playing this game. Like you'll play through a piece of the game and then it's like, yeah, you didn't do that fast enough. So now you got to replay that whole long segment again and do everything again. Or yeah, you did meet that objective, but the sky shifted, so now you have to do something different in a different way and slightly change up, but you're going to run through the exact same level just like you just did. It gets pretty stale. So I put a little time into this last summer, and I thought like this was going to be my summer game that I was just going to attach myself to, and ultimately I got bored and I moved on to something else. So I don't know if I would ever go back to this. Maybe there are some fans of this out there. You can tell me if I'm wrong. This game just is not Zelda to me. Like they they probably would have done better if they just made up a new franchise to come up with some of the gameplay ideas they had with this, and maybe it would have been okay. But it kind of felt like sacrilege to the Zelda series, but by going this obtuse with the design of the game. Obviously, Zelda's taken a lot of twists and turns since then. Some of the other games are, a little bit more wacky than so the original theme of Zelda, but this is the one that they really, I guess, wanted to try something new and push the series in a different direction. And frankly, I don't think it was the right thing to do. The other game that came out before was just much better. Wow, McFly, you may not want to broadcast that comment too much, but maybe talking about the experience of marriage is what this brings to the table. So I'll let that one sink in for everybody. But anyways, this game exists. Obviously, you can play it on other systems now because Nintendo isn't about to let a cash cow go unmilked. So it's been put on compilation packs and whatnot. And obviously, there's a remade version for 3DS, I think it is. That probably is a little bit okay, but it's not something. It's a classic. So that now that I've gone through everything, is actually my N64 library. And I did ramble much longer than I would if this was like a true focused console collection series video. Maybe one on the system down the road, but I thought, just an idea for a stream, this might be fun and see like what you guys thought. I was really hoping to get some people like defending the N64 tooth and nail, but I guess I know my main group of fans a little bit better than that. That I didn't think that was going to be the case. So, but I'm sure I'll get some comments I put on the stream. Some people will feel very differently, and maybe get upset that I'm railing on some of their all-time favorite games or their favorite game console. That's the beauty of gaming, is that every console has its own strengths and weaknesses. I just think this one has a lot of weaknesses that really outweigh the benefits of the console. But I'm not going to totally poo-poo it. There's a few games in the stack that I've shown that I do like, so it's got that going for it. But anyway, that's really all I have for the N64 content. So I can hang out for a little bit if there's anything else you guys want to talk about. And if not, I can certainly wrap up as well. I might play some games. Now I got the idea that I want to go back and play the Star Soldier game. I really like that one. All right. Well, I'm feeling like chat is at a standstill. McFly, thanks for hanging out for sure. Always appreciate it. Like talking to you. And anyone else that's still around, thanks for watching. So I'm going to wrap it up. I'm going to grab another beer, play some Star Soldier Vanishing Earth on N64, and file all these games back on the shelf because I think I got them a lot of orders. Now I got to figure that out. But appreciate you guys watching tonight, and hopefully it was fun doing a little more of a casual stream than a focused video. I like doing these every once in a while, so if you do too, you can let me know, and hope we'll have another stream. I won't wait 4 or 5 months this time before I do the next one. So I guess I'll head out for the night, and everyone have a good one. Appreciate watching.